Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. And if you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. But one thing I do want to mention is that if you do like these videos and you like hearing about upcoming campaigns, you'll definitely want to go over to Boardgame Co's channel and subscribe to him because he puts out a video at the end of each month covering the following month and letting you know of all the campaigns that we know about so far. And we are near the end of October, so Alex is going to have his video for November very soon now, and you'll definitely want to check that out. I don't really have too much else to say, so let's check out the campaigns. And the first campaign we have launches on October 31st, and it's called The Thinning Veil. And this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 300 minutes to play. And the reason for that is that this is a narrative campaign game, but it can also be played as one-shot scenarios, and this is a cooperative game. This is going to have a theme that is in the horror genre, but focuses on Celtic mythology and Irish legend. And the way that this game plays is that each player is going to be playing as their own asymmetrical character, and you're going to be able to choose a scenario to play, or if you're playing the campaign mode, it's going to walk you through the scenarios in sequential order. But essentially, each game you're going to be playing through a multi-level dungeon. We're going to be starting on a specific tile, and then you're going to be randomly generating tiles as you progress and move through the dungeon until you go through all the different levels and eventually face off against a final boss. And the final boss could be hordes and hordes of enemies, or it could also be a specific monster that's just way stronger than the rest, or even a combination of the two. But this is a game that uses dice in almost every aspect, and as players are exploring the different tiles, you're going to be rolling dice to determine what appears there, and that could be different enemies or different points of interest like items or skill checks that players are going to have to pass. And as you are killing these different enemies, you're going to be collecting those souls, which you could spend to help you later in the game. But the thing that I find is the most interesting aspect of this game, and I think what sets it apart from other dungeon crawlers, is the way that the player boards work. Each player is going to be choosing their asymmetrical character and then sliding it into this dashboard. And on the bottom you have the different stats of your character, and you're essentially going to be adding cubes to each of the different stats, which you'll be able to spend or you might gain or lose throughout the game. But your stats generally mean your capacity for that specific stat. So if you're a berserker, you might be really high in health but really low in faith. And there'll be different opportunities to use each of these stats either for skill checks or fighting or any other actions that you might perform out on the main board. But my favorite part about this board is the way the actions play into it, and all the actions are outlined on the right hand side of the board. And at the start of your turn, you're going to be rolling dice that have all those different icons matching the actions. And whichever icons you roll, you're going to be adding an activation cube to each of those associated actions. This is going to let you know which actions you have available on your turn, except for this final action, which is the enemy activation space, and any cubes that go into there are going to activate the enemies. And the reason that I find this so interesting is because it means you're not necessarily going to have the same actions available to you every single turn. Since you're rolling dice, you're going to have to roll with the punches and sometimes just do the best with what you have available to you. Luckily, there is some mitigation and there is some ways to control this, because if there's any actions that aren't particularly useful on your turn, you can actually slide them over to the left side of the board and bank those for a future turn. So you can guarantee that you have that available to you on your next turn. But since this does involve dice rolling, there is always a chance that you just roll a ton of enemy activations on your turn, which isn't a great thing, but you can always choose to skip your turn and ignore all results of the dice, but there will always be one enemy activation if you decide to go that route. And the game continues like this until the players reach the final boss, and if they beat the boss, then they win the game. And if you're interested in this game or any other that I have to mention in this video, you can find links in the description below. And this next campaign is also launching October 31st, but this one is not for a board game, but it is for something that could be really useful on your board game nights, or especially for your RPG sessions. And this is called Cthulhu CoinSides, and what this is essentially a replacement for any type of die that you might need to roll. Rather than rolling that die, you can just take this coin and spin it because it's perfectly balanced and has protruded centers on each side. And you can just spin it and then stop it at any moment by putting your finger on it. And then whatever value is beside your finger essentially acts as the value that you would have rolled. And it has all these different numbers on it segmented in different ways, each representing a different die. So if you want to roll a D3 or a D6 or a D12 or a D20, there's going to be options for that, and then you're just looking at those numbers when you spin the die, and then you're going to be using that for your roll. But on the backside, it has a couple other options, including a yes, no, maybe. So if you want to use it as kind of a magic 8-ball, you can use that. And it also has some letters around the outside, so you can also use this as a cipher. But my favorite use of this coin is to use it as a timer. And I know that might seem a little bit unconventional, but you can actually spin this and then just use it as a timer, because whenever it stops spinning, then the time is up. And the reason that I really like this as a timer is because how much time you get depends on how well you spun it. Because if you don't spin it well, it's going to topple over sooner and give you less time. So it has a little bit of variability, which is something that you can't actually get with a sand timer. It also just looks really cool and has a nice weight to it. It also comes with a little stand so you can put it up on display. Of course, this is called Cthulhu CoinSides, so it is themed with a cultist type of theme, but I believe they will also be offering their original CoinSides as well. That can also replace dice in the same way and can also be used as a timer, but it has a really classy look to it, especially with the different suits of the cards on each of the quadrants. And they did send me one of these during the first campaign, and the quality is really solid, and I don't use it all the time, but it is a nice change of pace if you just want to switch it up once in a while. I do like rolling dice, but it is also fun spinning stuff. I think this is just a nice tool to have at any moment, especially if you're a game master and you want certain outcomes to be dependent on a single dice roll. Obviously, if you want to roll multiple dice at once, it's faster to roll all those dice than to spin this coin multiple times. But if you are just rolling one die, this is a great alternative because it also just stays in the spot that you spin it. It's not going to bounce all over the table, knock over tokens, or fly off the table. And since this has so many uses to it, it just makes it really versatile for that single roll. And if this one sounds interesting to you, links in the description below. And now we're going to be getting into games for November, but before we do that, I just want to go over some campaigns that I was expecting in October but never got any confirmation for, except for this first one, which was actually submitted to me, but it was kind of submitted incorrectly, so I didn't actually cover it when it launched. So I just want to give it a special mention right now, and this is for Wana, and this is a strategy game for 2 players. And the way that this game works is that players are just going to be taking turns just moving one of their own marbles, and the first player that's able to trap one of their opponent's marbles is the winner of the game. So you don't have to capture all their pieces, you just have to capture a single one, which makes this game really simple to learn and teach, and really quick to play with a focus on positioning and maneuvering. And I'll have a link to this campaign in the description below. Now let's go over the games that I was expecting in October but never actually got an exact date for. And the first one is for Axon Protocol, where players are going to be using a shared worker placement board and you're going to be trying to hack innocent citizens as well as corporations in order to gain the most profit. And then we have Sugar Heist Crib of Thieves, and this is a standalone expansion to the original game where you're going to be battling your friends, collecting, trading, and stealing candy. And then we also have an Age Contrived, and this is a Euro game where players are all different gods, but you're only as powerful as the people believe you are. And then we have Sniper Kill Confirmed, which is actually a tabletop solo game, which is not something that I see too often. But you're taking on the role of a sniper and a spotter in search of your target in completing your mission. And then finally we have Air Postal, where players are back in the 1920s at the dawn of flight, and players are going to be flying their planes, trying to create better routes and transport goods across the world. But like I said, I was expecting this campaign to launch in October, but I never got an exact date, and even the games I do get exact dates for still often do not launch on that date, so the probability of these launching in October are pretty low, but I just wanted to mention them just in case they pop up, and you can find links to all of these in the description below. And now launching on November 1st, we have Ocean's Legends of the Deep, and I covered this last week and also the week before, so hopefully it actually launches this week. I'm pretty sure it will, but since I already covered this one, I'll go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. It is a competitive game where players are competing to have the most fish. And the way this works is that players are going to be playing cards in order to migrate fish to their boards, or to create a new species of fish by taking a fish board and putting it in front of them and assigning one of the cards to that board. Or if you already have one of those boards out, you can also add more traits to an existing species. And the placement of your different fish species relative to each other does matter because there is adjacency between them, and even adjacency between your fish and your opponent's fish. And a lot of the different species that you'll create will have traits that can be affected by the fish adjacent to them, or can affect or attack those fish themselves. And the fish board that's associated with your fish species represents their population, and you can increase this by attacking other players successfully or by foraging for more fish. There's also some special ways through abilities that you might be able to modify this, but if you ever end up filling up your board, you actually overpopulate, which is detrimental to your species and cuts your population in half. And in addition to that, each round your fish are going to age, which is going to cost you 1 population from each of your species of fish. And if that population ever runs out, then that species of fish is going to go extinct and you're going to be removing it from the table. And a really neat aspect about this game is that about halfway through you're going to be experiencing the Cambrian explosion, which was a historical period in time where evolution was happening very rapidly. When this happens in the game, you're going to be moving essentially twice as fast because you're going to be able to draw 2 cards each turn, but then at the end of each turn you're going to be losing 2 population per species. This also allows players to access the traits of the deep sea fish, which will have some more advanced abilities. And this new expansion is going to be adding more mythical and fantastical creatures into the game. At the start of the game, each player is going to be drafting 4 of these new legend cards, and these cards are going to have game-changing abilities and global effects. And during your turn, you'll have the option to play one of these cards in addition to your normal card play. And you can also pay the difference between 2 cards if you want to swap out your old legend card for a new one. This is another game that was a very close runner-up for our Discord pick of the week. And if you're interested in this one, you can find links to it in the description below. And you can also download this game on your mobile phone. I believe it's free, so if you do want to try it before you buy it, that's also a great option. And this next campaign was expected to launch months and months and months ago, so it's been long awaited and they kept pushing it back, but it's finally actually going to launch on November 1st. And this one is our Discord pick of the week, just barely beating the NGs by a single vote. And this one is Slay the Spire. And if you're not familiar with Slay the Spire, this is a deck building game, but was originally offered as a video game. You can go ahead and download it now on your phone or on your Switch, or I think also on your PlayStation or Xbox. And it's a really great game. I think it's only like $10. I did download it on my phone months and months ago, and I've beat it over and over again because it's a ton of fun, and there's a whole bunch of different characters that you can play as that each have their own decks that they have access to, and they all play very different from each other. Some of the characters I like more than others, but I do like the challenge of having to play the game very differently depending on who you're playing as. But it's also just a really hard game, so you do feel really accomplished when you do beat it, and it does take multiple times to really beat it. But something that I think is really interesting about it is that this is actually a co-op game, whereas the original was just a solo experience. And the way that this game works is that you're going to be going through multiple acts, climbing up the spire, and then going up against a final boss. And as you're climbing up the spire, there's going to be multiple different paths that you can choose from. Some might give you some random event, while others might give you an opportunity to heal and level up your cards, while others might be different monsters that you can fight. And fighting monsters does come with its risk that you can take damage because you don't heal after a battle. But the nice thing about fighting monsters is that it does give you access to free cards that you can add to your hand at the end of the battle. And you can also gain coins that you can spend at the shop if you visit it. And visiting this shop is just really nice because of the amount of options it gives you. And even if you're playing this game with the exact same character, you're going to be building your deck differently every single time, and there might be a different strategy that you're going from one game to the other. And having all those extra options will really allow you to find the items or relics or other cards that pair really well with the deck that you're building. But also the shop is one of the places you can go to actually remove cards from your deck, which is super helpful because if you have some really amazing cards, either you upgraded them or they just pair really well together, you can remove some of your lower level cards or some of your starter cards that are clogging up your deck. And if you're familiar with the video game, you're probably seeing a lot of similarities here, which makes sense. But the main difference between the video game and this board game is that in the video game you have a larger subset of cards out on display that you can just go ahead and choose from. But in the board game you have a smaller subset of cards that's just limited to the relics and the items. And if you want to buy combat cards, then you will be drawing 3 from the combat card deck, and then you can pay their associated cost if you want to add them to your hand. And you'll also gain relics for free anytime that you visit these treasure chests, but my favorite tile of them all is these bigger, more scarier monster tiles. And the reason I like these is because these are kind of like mini bosses that are a lot stronger than the regular monsters, and there is a bigger risk of going up against them, but anytime that you do defeat them, you are guaranteed a relic in addition to additional cards and coins that you'll gain from them. And if you don't die before you get there, you'll make your way to the final boss. And the reason that these are cards is because you can actually have different bosses for each of the acts. And when you get to this point in the game, you're going to be flipping that card to reveal which final boss you're going up against. And of course, players will each have their own player boards to keep track of their coins, items, and decks. And of course, you're going to be using those cards mostly in your battles. And in a battle, you can go up against multiple monsters at once. And each of the monsters do have their own health trackers and individual abilities and attacks. And they can behave a little bit differently, with some of the monsters' attacks being determined by a dice roll and others just going in sequential order, which can lead to some sort of effect if you're not able to defeat them before they get to their final action. And of course, most of your cards will deal a varying amount of damage, but they can also have all sorts of other effects, like allowing you to draw more cards into your hand, giving you more action points to spend on your turn, doubling the damage of other cards, or even powering up your character or harming your opponents. And that can be done by gaining armor or strength, or causing your opponents to become fragile, which makes them easier to deal damage to, or weakened, which makes their attacks do a lot less damage. And combat works exactly the same for the final bosses, but of course they're going to be a lot stronger and have all sorts of varying effects and special abilities that are unique to them. And I did already mention that this was our Discord pick of the week, but this is also a game that I'm super excited about. I really did like the video game. I think it was worth every penny, and I do recommend downloading it and trying it out for yourself. Not only is it a fun game, but it'll let you know if you want to make that bigger investment into this board game, since there will be a lot of similarities between them. And I think if you like the video game, you'll probably like this board game. And also the constant delays that this game went through is encouraging to me. I do think that's a good sign because they're spending the extra time to get the game right rather than just rushing it out while they're still finding some issues and things that they could tweak. And I do think there's a lot of care that's going into this game just from reading some of the posts from the creators out on the BGG forums. I really like the things that they have to say, and I'm just consistently finding indicators of good design where they're trying to make the game as fun as possible and strip away a lot of the fiddliness. And if you want to know more, they do have a post of 7 random differences from the video game, and these are not comprehensive. There's going to be a lot more differences than what they mentioned here. I've already mentioned a few of them, and there'll be a lot more to discover. And if you think this one looks interesting, you can find links to the campaign in the description below, and you can go ahead and click that Notify Me button, which I have already clicked, along with nearly 20,000 other people, which is just incredible. And also launching on November 1st, we have Explosions in the Laboratory. And this is also a campaign that I did cover in the past, so I'll just go ahead and roll that footage for you now. And this is a push your luck game that plays over 4 phases. The first phase is the planning phase, and this is where you're going to be able to play one-time use cards that can affect scoring for your turn. And then we move into the mixing phase where a number of chemical cards from the deck are going to be laid out onto the table. This is going to let players know what chemicals they must mix. Throughout the game, there's going to be a fire level that's increasing, and as that fire level grows, the more volatile the mixtures will become. Players will be drawing these cards, and then they'll be able to place them into their own flasks. And they can continue to do this until they decide to stop. And when they stop, they can score their mixture, but if they push too far and create one of the combos of chemicals in your flask that causes an explosion, then that's going to end your turn immediately and you won't get any points. And the player who has the most points at the end of the game wins the game. Also launching on November 1st, we have Tank Clash Western Front, and this is a 2-player skirmish game that takes just 30 to 120 minutes to play. And in this game, each player is going to be controlling their own platoon of tanks, each with their own stats and defense, and your tanks are going to be represented by stacks of tokens out on the main board. Depending on your tank's defense value, you're going to be adding one more token to that stack, and if players want to defeat that tank, then they need to deplete that tank of all its tokens. But what's nice here is that you're also going to have an ace character that you can add to one of your tanks to roll an additional die when it comes to your dice rolling. And to win the game, you just have to complete one of 3 objectives first. You can either capture an enemy checkpoint, destroy a subset of their tanks, or destroy the tank that has their ace unit on it. And the main play area is going to be set up by placing out 4 different boards, and these boards will have all sorts of different terrain on them, and they'll have different effects on the tanks that are in those spaces. And players are going to be taking turns performing just 2 actions on their turn, and they're going to be spending those actions between movement and attack. And if you're attacking, you're going to have some sort of range, and then you're going to be resolving that attack using dice rolling. And if your tank's able to roll multiple dice, that's always beneficial because you'll always be able to take the value of the highest die. And the dice don't directly correlate to damage, instead they all correlate to some sort of action. Most of the actions do deal damage, but some of them might have other effects like pushing your opponent back a space. And anytime you deal damage, you just put put a damage token out on that tank, and every time a tank is dealt 3 damage, it's going to be removing 1 token. And players can also gain morale cards by completing different feats or certain dice rolls, and you can also spend those on your turn in order to perform whatever ability it grants. And the first player to complete one of those 3 objectives first wins the game. And also launching on November 1st is a game that doesn't have the best box art in my opinion, but the art on the actual game looks fine. But more importantly, I think the design of this one does look really solid, and it does look like a lot of fun. And this is BloodRunes, which plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play. And the way this game works is that there's essentially 2 types of cards. There's rune cards, and then there are spell cards. And the spell cards are going to have some sort of objective for you to complete. And if you're able to do that, you'll get some sort of reward. And all the different objectives for these cards require you putting runes out on the board in a certain configuration. But since all the players are adding their rune cards to the same board, you can take advantage of the existing cards there to try and complete your spell cards. But you can also put cards on top of other people's cards. And in this game, players are going to be taking turns performing a limited number of actions on their turn. And you're going to be spending those actions to do different things like put rune cards out on the board, or if you're able to complete one of your spell cards, you can cast that spell to gain its benefit, or you can also spend an action to draw a new rune card from the display, or a new spell card from the display, or spend an action to refresh either of those displays if you don't see anything there that you want. And there are a whole bunch of different spell cards you can gain with different abilities that can do different things, like grant you a permanent upgrade to the amount of actions available to you on your turn, gain you victory points, steal victory points from the other players, or even give yourself protection as a sort of armor from an opponent's spell, which will allow you to discard that card rather than taking the effects of the spell. And the first player to get a certain amount of victory points is going to be the one that wins the game, so generating those or stealing them is super important, but you also want to make sure that you're protecting your own from the other players. And if you want to know more about this campaign or check it out, I have links in the description below. And also launching on November 1st, we have Oil Town, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play. And something that's really interesting about this one is it's not launching on GameFound or Kickstarter or even BackerKit. This one is actually going to be launching on the Game Crafter, and I wasn't going to cover this one initially, but there's a couple reasons that I did. First, I just wanted to mention how cool this Game Crafter campaign page actually looks. You're actually going to be getting a discount depending on the amount of copies that are created, which I think is a really cool feature. And whether you're the first backer or the 50th backer, you're still going to be getting the same discount as everyone else depending on how many copies are sold. And because of the way that this works, it really feels like I'm doing a good deed here by covering it, because the more people that would be interested in it that discover it are going to drive these numbers up, giving a discount to everyone else. So I've done my good deed for the year. And it's only November, not bad. And the second reason that I decided to cover this is because it does look like they put some effort into the presentation here, offering all the same info that you would find on your typical Kickstarter or GameFound. In fact, I do find this one a little less overwhelming, which is a good thing. And I just threw out my last mouse and had to buy a new one, and I only had that mouse for like just over a year, which is like record time for breaking a mouse. But the sad thing is that mouse still completely worked perfectly, except for the scroll wheel broke. And if you've ever been on Kickstarter, I think you probably know what caused it. And the third and final reason that I decided to cover this campaign is because I already covered it in the past. And this is a competitive card-driven dice placement where you take on the roles of pioneers in the Wild West, drilling for oil to strike it rich. Players will place their oil well cards at the start of the game and then draw cards depicting underground drill tunnels. These tunnels can be pieced together like a puzzle to connect the different paths. But these paths won't be complete because players will need to roll dice and then place those dice in the gaps to complete the path and create a route for that precious oil to get to the surface. Any leftover dice after that can be used to activate special abilities on helper cards. This game gives optional modes for positive and confrontational player interaction, and also features some unique hand-painted watercolor art. And also launching on November 1st, we have the Goblin Uprising. This plays 2 to 6 players and takes just 1 to 2 hours to play. And this is a semi-cooperative game that if you're interested in, you'll definitely want to sign up to get notified of its launch, because you'll get the campaign book add-on added to your pledge completely for free. But more importantly, if you want to know how this game plays, this is a game that I've covered in the past, so I'll just go ahead and roll that footage for you now. and this is a competitive board game where players are playing as the goblins, fighting back against the elves, dwarves, merfolk, and humans who have ravaged their land and bullied them for just far too long. Players will each control their own goblin miniature with its own special abilities, fighting style, and player board, and players will be fighting against armies of the different mythical races, earning experience points by defeating the different troops across the map, and even completing different quests. Players can then use those experience points to level up their characters and get stronger. On top of that, players can also get an edge by gathering powerful loot, making legendary allies, and making and breaking alliances with the other players. One of the mythical races will hold power over the entire realm, and the first player to defeat the leader at the center of the map wins the game. And there will be some surprises that slightly change your goals as the game progresses, because once a player is strong enough to challenge the final boss, that boss's behavior is going to change. This means that the boss might get stronger and even require more than one player to take out, or you might require a certain strategy or weapon to cater to its weakness. Some of these variable endings will even change the way that the players have to interact with each other, so there'll be quite a different feel depending on how the game ends. And just a reminder that if any of these games interest you, I have links in the description below. And also launching on November 1st, we have Role Player Adventures Gulpax's Secret. And this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 90 to 150 minutes to play. And this is an expansion to the game Role Player Adventures, which was kind of an expansion to the game Role Player, where in the original game Role Player, you would be building up a character and you'd essentially be gaining victory points for building up their stats and gaining them items and reputation. And whoever had the most reputation at the end of the game would win the game. But then Role Player Adventures came out, which allowed you to use those characters in an actual adventure, and you didn't need the original game in order to play that. There were also pre-generated characters that you could use instead, but it offered an RPG style campaign adventure where the decisions you made would affect how the story unfolds, and it also really played on the concept of morality, where you could fight or befriend enemies, and you could even stay true or abandon the laws of the kingdom. And even though Role Player Adventures is kind of a spin-off of that original game, it still really does seem to stand on its own, and a lot of people seem to love it because an 8.3 is really incredible for a rating on Board Game Geek. And the new expansion does require the base game to play, so if you haven't already played the base game, I would probably recommend just backing that to see if you like the game first, and because it does require the base game, I'm sure that will also be offered in the campaign as well. And of course, this expansion is going to be adding all sorts of new cards and characters to mix into the game, but it's also going to be adding a new 7 adventure campaign, which is going to feature new environments and new challenges for players to explore. And launching on November 1st, we have Legendary Tea Farmer, and this plays 3 to 5 players and takes 100 to 140 minutes to play. And in this game, players are each going to be running their own farm, starting with an abandoned lot, and then turning it into an established estate. And the way that this game plays is that each round is going to have 3 phases, starting with a bidding phase, where players are going to be bidding to hire the most legendary tea farmer in all the world, which is, of course, Badass Bidjo. And if you're able to hire him, he's going to allow you to gain more victory points throughout the rest of the round. But of course, if you are the highest bidder, you're going to have to spend whatever you bid, and that might hurt you in the following round because this is the prep phase where you're going to be spending money to buy new fields, paid to expand your factory capacity, hire new workers and pay your existing ones, and even buy development cards. And in order for the fields to be operational, you're going to have 4 workers for each field, and then the development cards will have all sorts of different effects, like allowing you to sell tea at a higher price, allow you to produce more tea with the same amount of workers, or just straight up earn you victory points. And then the final phase in the round is the production and sales phase, where you're going to be drawing an event card which can affect all players, and then you're going to be rolling a die for each of the fields that you have, and that's going to dictate how much each of those fields produce. So obviously having more fields allows you to roll more die, which allows you to increase the probability that you're going to produce a lot more tea. And the game continues like this until one player reaches 80 victory points, and then that player wins the game, which was kind of an expansion to the game Role Player, where in the original game Role Player, you would be building up a character and you'd essentially be gaining victory points for building up their stats and gaining them items and reputation, and whoever had the most reputation at the end of the game would win the game. But then Role Player Adventures came out, which allowed you to use those characters in an actual adventure, and you didn't need the original game in order to play that. There were also pre-generated characters that you could use instead, but it offered an RPG style campaign adventure where the decisions you made would affect how the story unfolds, and it also really played on the concept of morality, where you could fight or befriend enemies, and you could even stay true or abandon the laws of the kingdom. And even though Role Player Adventures is kind of a spin-off of that original game, it still really does seem to stand on its own, and a lot of people seem to love it because an 8.3 is really incredible for a rating on Board Game Geek. And the new expansion does require the base game to play, so if you haven't already played the base game, I would probably recommend just backing that to see if you like the game first, and because it does require the base game, I'm sure that will also be offered in the campaign as well. And of course, this expansion is going to be adding all sorts of new cards and characters to mix into the game, but it's also going to be adding a new 7 adventure campaign, which is going to feature new environments and new challenges for players to explore. And also launching on the 1st, we have Zone Wars Mutant Year Zero, and this was a game that's originally an RPG, and you can go ahead and play that now. But this campaign is going to be offering a tabletop skirmish version of the game that can be played with up to 2 to 4 players, and it's also going to be offering a video game, which is really interesting as well, especially if you're interested in this IP. The tabletop version will provide the miniatures, terrain, and rule set for you to play the game, and it's also going to offer a completely free and fully playable print and play PDF version of the game that will be available to download in the Kickstarter page at launch. So if you want to check out the game or even just try it for yourself before you buy it, you can go ahead and try that print and play version, which is a really cool option. Links in the description below. And also launching on November 1st, we have Trike Season. This is actually 3 games in 1 that comes in this laser cut box, and all 3 of these games are going to make use of these triangular tokens that each have 3 different notches cut into them. There's going to be a V-shaped notch, as well as a square notch and a round notch. And each location will show up twice amongst all the different tokens, and the first game makes use of that because this one is mostly just a memory game. We're going to be putting all the tokens face down, and then players will be taking turns flipping them up, trying to find the matching one in order to score a victory point, and then the team or player that gets the most victory points wins the game. And then the second game is going to play completely different, where these tokens are going to be evenly distributed amongst all the players, and then on your turn you'll be able to put 1 token out on the board if you're able, trying to match up the different notches with like notches that are already in play in order to try and get rid of all your tokens first. And whichever player does that wins the game. And then the third game does have some similarities to the second, where you're trying to match up notches, but this one is a little bit more advanced because you're not actually trying to match like notches together. Instead, you're trying to match up notches in a sequential order, where first a triangle needs to be matched with a circle, and then a circle needs to be matched with a square, and then a square will be matched with a triangle. And that needs to always be done in sequential order, even between players. And this is a game that can be only played in teams because each team is going to be associated with one side or the other, and whenever you make a connection, you're going to be flipping up both the tokens that you've connected to your side. And this makes it really interesting because you're always going to be wanting to connect your tokens to tokens that aren't already flipped to your side. So it's going to limit your results, especially if you're doing particularly well, because the better you're doing, the less options you'll have to connect to. And it's this third game that looks like the most exciting of the 3 to me, and it's probably the only one that I would play, but it is good to have those other 2 options as well. And if you want to check this one out, I got links in the description below. And that is everything I have for you this week, but of course this video wouldn't be complete without a few awesome giveaways. And this week does not disappoint because the first one we have is going to be for a copy of Hidden Leaders, as well as the new expansion Hidden Leaders Forgotten Legends. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a competitive game where you're going to have 2 faction tokens out on a main board, but players are not playing as these factions. Instead, players are going to be playing as different leaders, trying to affect the orientation of those factions out on the main board. Each player is going to have 2 different faction cards, and they're all going to want to have those tokens out on the board in a particular configuration. And all a player has to do is fulfill one of their leader card's objectives at the end of the game, then they would have won the game. This could mean having 1 token further along the track than the other, or having them on the same space, or having them pushed down the track as far as possible into the undead section. This game does have a bit of deduction element as well, because you know all the possibilities of what the other players are trying to do, but you don't know which objective each player is going for, and they do also have 2 objective cards, so you never know when they're going to switch from one to the other, because they're only trying to fulfill one of them by the end of the game, and you can change your strategy mid-game depending on the opportunities that are available to you. And this new expansion is going to be adding all sorts of modules that you can mix into the game. There's going to be a 5th faction included that all players can make use of, but if you use that faction too much, you're going to cause that faction to win the game instead of one of the players. And you can also play with the new artifacts, which is going to give each player a special ability, but has only a limited amount of uses per game. And then there's also the corruption tokens. And as I said, this giveaway is going to be for the base game as well as the new expansion, both in the deluxeified forms. And to enter this giveaway, I wanted to do something a little more fun and different from my usual giveaways. I mean, they're always fun, but I wanted to do something different. And as I was trying to think of something, I came across this link on the campaign page to a little known content creator known as Jesse. And he runs Quack & Co. and he also runs Quackalope. I think he has a few other channels as well. Check them all out and subscribe if you haven't already. But I know he's a fan of this game. He's offered a lot of coverage for it, and I think they've even included a animated duck in one of the cards. And all you have to do to enter this giveaway is go ahead and sabotage that. I mean, click on this link on the campaign page to go visit that video, and then leave a comment in the comment section below with a name of a celebrity that you think Jesse looks like, because not only do games have many forms, but Jesse also has many forms. He has his short hair version, he has his long hair version, he has his Angus Young version, and then he also has his final form, which I haven't seen in a long time, which is Tooked Jesse. And toques are what we call beanies in Canada. Beanies sounds weird to me. But leaving a comment on Jesse's video is not what's making this giveaway different, because I've done that before. What I also want you to do is to like whichever comment you think is the best, and whichever comment gets the most votes is going to be the winner of Hidden Leaders. Pick wisely. And the next giveaway we have is for a pledge for Cosmoctopus, and this looks like a really fun game where players are each trying to complete all the tentacles of their space octopus. There's going to be a central area with a bunch of different action tiles, and on your turn you can just move the octopus one space to another tile, and then you're going to take that action. This will normally mean gaining you a card or some sort of resources, and these cards can do different things like grant you permanent or one-time use abilities. But then there are also objective cards where if you get the different resources that are outlined on the card in a particular order, then you will be able to gain whatever rewards it grants, which is usually one of the tentacles that you're trying to gain in order to win the game. And this giveaway is going to be for the Cosmoctopus pledge. And to enter this giveaway, I kind of really liked that idea that I just had, so let's just do it again. And I picked a video from this campaign, and that's going to be for One Stop Co-op Shop. And all you have to do is jump over to that video and leave a comment down below with a lookalike celebrity that you think looks like Mike over at One Stop Co-op Shop. And he's not actually featured in this video except for his hands. But if you want a little bit more to work with, this is his beautiful face right here. But don't leave the comment on this video, make sure that you're leaving it on the one that is linked on the actual campaign page. And once again, make sure to like the comment that you think is the best, and whichever comment gets the most likes is the one that's going to win a copy of Cosmoctopus. And also I just want to mention that both Mike at One Stop Co-op Shop and Jesse with all the channels that he runs both do an excellent job and offer very different content. I recommend checking them both out and see if you like what they have to offer, and give them a subscribe if you haven't already. Good luck in the giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw the winners for last week's giveaway, and the first one we had was for Rone Invasion. And to draw a winner, I use this fancy application here, and all these extra names down here are bonus entries for my Patreon subscribers. If you like this sort of content and you want to help make these efforts just a little bit more sustainable for me, I truly do appreciate it, and I have a link to my Patreon in the description below. And it also gets you some bonus entries into these giveaways, which is never a bad thing. But let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner is Tavanish, and this is one of our Patreon subscribers. Congratulations, I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pledge for Rone. And the next giveaway we had was for Mind Your Business. And we're going to do the exact same thing, so let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner is... And this is actually one of the bonus entries from my very special birthday giveaway, where I gave away entries into all future giveaways until you eventually won a giveaway, which this person now has. So I'm going to remove those giveaways from the pool. So congratulations, Coke-Lead. I'll email you and let you know that you won yourself a pledge for Mind Your Business. And I'm probably going to black out his email here so nobody spams him. I'm not worried about any of you. It's just that there's a lot of spam bots on YouTube, and I just don't trust them. And that is everything I have for you this week, but as a special bonus at the end of this video, I'm just going to let you know a couple games that I recently backed, because I haven't really been backing anything lately. I mean, there's a lot of games coming out that I really did want to play, but I wasn't really willing to jump in on them without playing them for myself first. And also prices have just been going crazy, and I've also been spending money on other stuff. And my time has just been ridiculously limited between my job and doing this stuff and having whatever remains I have of my social life. But all that's going to change because I backed 2 campaigns, and that is Aqua Garden. And the reason that I backed this one is that it does look like a lot of fun. It's not really a crazy heavy game, and it is a bit of set collection, which I'm not a huge fan of. But the game itself has enough layered on it that I think I still will enjoy it, and I think it's something that a lot of my friends would enjoy. It's also a game that's really difficult to get even in retail, so if it turns out to be a game that we just never end up playing, I think I could still sell it for what I bought it for, while simultaneously giving someone else the opportunity to get their hands on it. But I think at the very least, if I don't play this a lot at my house, then I could just bring it to my cottage and play it at the cottage because the theme works so well. And of course, the other game I backed was Cthulhu Death May Die Fear of the Unknown. I already have all the content for this game, including the giant miniature, and it's my favorite co-op game, so I just find ways to justify buying this. But I just love the game, and even if I don't ever get to playing this content, I think it's worth the risk, and I do think I will get to playing it because I'm already almost all the way through the original game, and I will definitely be trying out those new Insanity cards as well as the new Elder Gods as quickly as possible. And the only other thing I want to mention is that I've been falling drastically behind on my emails and my Discord and my Patreon messages, so I have a lot of catching up to do. The last couple months have just been insane, and it's not like I need a break or that I'm tired or burnt out. It's just that I just physically haven't had enough time to do everything I want to do. And I don't know exactly who's messaged me and what I need to catch up on, so if you're waiting on a reply, just know that I'm definitely not ignoring you, and I will always respond eventually. But I do need to get caught up, and my goal is to do that by Monday. So as always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.